Thanks for joining us on the second of our Advent series in Abide with Beauty, and continued gratitude to the St. Monica Institute for hosting these sessions. Last week we looked at Advent through the eyes of Mary with the Annunciation by Henry Ossawa Tanner. If you missed that session, you can look at it on my website, lesmiller.ca. There are also links on my website to the main works of art that we'll be using each week. Years ago, I wrote the reflections for Word Made Flesh for Advent. It was the conclusion of the year of St. Joseph, so I focused on him for my reflections. The theme was the spiritual tools of St. Joseph. I used brief Visio Divina on Sunday and solemnities that were accompanied with art. Some of these pieces will supplement our main focus this evening, the dream of St. Joseph. Gaze at the art. Take in the whole scene. What are your initial impressions? Let your eyes rest on the details. Joseph, his expression, his posture, his clothing, the chair, the floor, his tools, the drapes, the colors, Mary, her expression, her posture, her clothing, the books on the bookstand, the footstool, the angel, the hands pointing in two directions, the breath, hair, the wings, the clothing, Does anything surprise you about this image? What are your initial thoughts about this painting? Let's consider the gospel that relates to this painting. It's taken from the first chapter of Matthew, verses 18 to 25. Now the birth of Jesus the Messiah took place in this way, when his mother Mary had been engaged to Joseph. But before they lived together, she was found to be with child from the Holy Spirit. Her husband Joseph, being a righteous man and unwilling to expose her to public disgrace, planned to dismiss her quietly. But just when he had resolved to do this, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream and said, "Joseph, son of David, Do not be afraid to take Mary for your wife, for the child conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. And she will bear a son, and you are to name him Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins. All this took place to fulfill what had been spoken by the Lord through the prophet. Look, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and they shall name him Emmanuel, which means God is with us. When Joseph awoke from sleep, he did as the angel of the Lord commanded him. He took her as his wife, but had no marital relations with her until she had borne a son, and he named him Jesus. Imagine yourself in the scene. What aspects of the passage are captured in the art? Abide for a while in the beauty of the scene. It is, in a sense, another Annunciation. Here's the artist's companion work, the Annunciation to Mary. A calling from God in our depths. What dreams do you have that could be callings from God? A desire to connect, to belong, a dream of peace, a dream of harmony, let's add some contextual layers. It hangs in the National Gallery in London. This is what they say about the painting. According to the Gospel of Matthew, an angel appeared to St. Joseph in a dream to confirm that the Virgin Mary had conceived Christ through the Holy Spirit. Champagne shows this angel suspended above Joseph and surrounded by a soft ray of light, pointing with one hand to heaven and with the other to Mary. A gesture often seen in biblical paintings. Kneeling in front of an open Bible, Mary glances toward the angel, her arms crossed and held against her chest. Joseph was the patron saint of workers, particularly carpenters and joiners. Scattered on the floor are his tools, a wooden mallet, chisel, and axe. He is shown as a youthful rather than elderly man, as was more common. The chair, with its ornately carved arms and legs, and deeply padded and tasseled cushion on which Joseph rests his head, are at odds with the simplicity of his yellow cloak and sandals. His appearance signifies humility, which the viewer would have been encouraged to follow. Champagne's figures were typically inspired by classical sculpture, and the drapery here appears solid and arranged in precise, large folds. Let's put the painting into its historical setting. It was painted in 1642. The creation was affected by two important points. As a result of the Protestant Reformation, the Catholic Church paid greater attention to the faith formation of the people. There was a desire to increase the biblical literacy of the faithful. Many, however, were illiterate, so religious biblical art was encouraged. Pieces such as our Dream of Joseph were intended for churches and chapels. Most of these were in portrait form, so matched the dominant vertical orientation of sacred spaces. They were also large so that they could be seen from a distance. This canvas is over 2 meters tall and was thought to be painted for the Minims convent, now demolished, but stood close to what is now the Place de Vendôme in Paris, not far from the Bastille site. This triptych by Hieronymus Bosch points us toward a second historical consideration. It's a nativity scene of the Epiphany. The shepherds are also included for good measure. The figures in black and the side panels are the Donas and St. Peter and St. Agnes. But where is Joseph? Here he is, a diminutive elderly figure sitting on an upturned basket, warming the swaddling clothes or diapers of Jesus. Art critics have pointed out that Joseph was sometimes seen as a minor figure until the influence of people like St. Francis de Sales took hold. He's often shown as feeble, comical, or irrelevant, but that changed in the early part of the 1600s. The feast day of St. Joseph on March 19th was established by Pope Gregory XV in 1621, marking the increased devotion to St. Joseph. In New France, we see this devotion carried forward, and St. Joseph was named the patron saint in 1637 and continues to be Canada's patron saint. So this subject was painted frequently during the 17th century, with this canvas being painted around 1642. This was a time of strife between Protestants and Catholics in Europe. Art such as this reinforced the Catholic case for venerating Joseph and Mary. Philippe de Champagne was born in 1602 in Brussels, but moved to Paris in 1621. Where he lived until his death in 1674. That places him amid the Baroque period of art with its ornate style of painting. This on the right is Luca Giordano's depiction of the same scene. Compare the two. Other than the angel, Philippe's painting lacks the supernatural detail and tends toward the realism of Caravaggio, perhaps in reaction to the excesses of the Baroque. Giordano's painting is the one I used in Word Made Flesh, not because I preferred it. Philippe de Champagne's painting appeals more to my minimalist eye. I used Giordano's depiction of the parallel annunciations because I could get photographic rights. For me, the most important detail were Joseph's tools. That was the theme that held the booklet together. It was the end of the year of St. Joseph, so I wanted to answer the question, what are the spiritual tools that Joseph demonstrated? What is in our spiritual toolkit? What tools do we need to develop this Advent? Of paintings involving St. Joseph was an important part of the Advent Reflection booklet. I started with last week's Annunciation by Tanner. I looked at that Giordano Dream of Joseph. On the lower center we see Gerrit von Honhorst's portrait of Jesus in the workshop of Joseph, and Guido Reni's Joseph with the infant Jesus in the bottom right. Note that all of these images show Joseph older than the depiction by Philippe de Champagne. How do you imagine Joseph? Let's step back from these details to contemplate the picture as a whole. St. Joseph himself doesn't utter a word that is recorded in the Bible. He is the model witness who listens with his whole being. He is a dreamer, following his namesake in Genesis. He's a protector and guide of ultimate holiness. What do we do to listen with our whole being to God? What do we do to nurture our faith in this Advent season? For what are we grateful at this time? Join us next week for a Visio Divina of Domenico Ghirlandaio's Visitation. Thanks for viewing this, and may God always be with you.